In the bustling kitchen of a renowned university in Portland, Oregon, amid clanging pans and hushed conversations, an older black woman in a white apron moves quietly, wiping down tables as she does daily. No one knows her name or notices her presence. But when a group of professors grapples with an equation unsolved for years, she listens, thinks, and dares to speak, only to be dismissed with a smirk. You work in the kitchen. Stay there. Unbeknownst to them, this woman once stood at the pinnacle of academia. With just 5 lines on a whiteboard, she was about to upend the entire university, proving that sometimes the sharpest mind in the room is the one nobody thought to ask. The steady drone of refrigerators, the clink of metal trays, and the aroma of scrambled eggs and slightly burnt bacon filled the air. It was 7:09 a.m. on May 3, 2024, when Miss Helen adjusted her white hairnet, took a deep breath, and braced for another day of invisibility. She had worked in the university cafeteria for nearly 9 years, scrubbing dishes, refilling the coffee station, and offering polite smiles, even when students ignored them. Professors passed her as if she were part of the cafeteria's fixtures, like the aging coffee machine in the corner, always functioning, always overlooked. But Miss Helen observed. She always observed. The university, one of the most prestigious in the Pacific Northwest, boasted sleek modern art on its walls and a campus that blended cinematic charm with architectural elegance. On that seemingly ordinary morning, amid lukewarm pancakes and weak coffee, Helen overheard something that quickened her pulse. A man's voice from the math department's table said, "It's baffling. The algorithm crashes at the 3rd cycle, even with logarithmic adjustments." Another voice, a woman's, crisp and assured, responded, "Did you account for the entropic growth factor? I reviewed the data last night. The issue's not technical, it's structural." Helen edged closer, pretending to organize some mugs. Her eyes flicked to a page strewn with equations. Those terms, that language, it wasn't alien to her. It was part of who she was, or rather, who she used to be. She paused and murmured to herself, "If the matrix is degenerate, why not invert the vector in R4? She didn't notice a professor had overheard. He raised an eyebrow and asked, "Excuse me, did you say something?" She froze, glanced at him, then at the floor and said, "Just thinking aloud." "Sorry." He smirked and said, "Well, we've got a linear algebra guru in the kitchen now." The others chuckled, not harshly, but as if the notion was ridiculous. Helen offered a faint smile, lowered her head, and slipped away. But inside, something stirred. That afternoon, the sun bathed the campus in a warm golden glow. The cafeteria had quieted, but the math professors lingered, laptops open, books piled high, voices growing tense. Helen was wiping down a tray someone left behind, her ears attuned. The gray-bearded professor said, 4 days of work and we're stuck. This equation has stumped Stanford, Yale, MIT. No consistent solution. Another, removing his glasses in frustration, muttered, "Just another fancy formula headed for the scrap pile of theory." Helen paused mid-wipe. Her eyes caught the notebook one of them was scribbling in. She recognized that structure, that logic, that rhythm. Without thinking, she spoke, "Sorry to interrupt, but have you tried flipping the second-order limit parameters? You might be assuming an error that isn't there." Silence fell. For pairs of eyes turned to her. A younger professor, smug with a university ID clipped to his jacket, stared as if she'd spoken out of turn at a formal gala. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" he asked. "The parameters," she repeated, softer now. "The error might be in the entry vector assumption. If you reframe the limit cycle," a scoff cut her off. "Well," he said, arms crossed, "looks like we've got a new math faculty member. Do you solve equations between cleaning shifts?" Polite laughs followed, sharp enough to sting. Helen's smile wavered. "Sorry, sir," she said, retreating to the counter. But this time, she didn't just walk away. She gripped the dish towel so tightly her knuckles paled. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was wounded pride awakening. That evening, in her modest Portland apartment, the old shower sputtered louder than it flowed, pipes creaking behind worn bathroom walls. Helen sat at a small wooden table, her apron folded on her lap, the overhead light flickering once before stabilizing. Before her was a weathered spiral-bound notebook, a faded sticker reading, MIT Class of '83. She opened it slowly, like unveiling a buried part of herself. The pages brimmed with handwritten formulas, precise diagrams, the kind of math that doesn't just come from study but lives within you. Back then, this was her language, not merely solving problems but feeling their pulse, sensing the rhythm of a flawed pattern and knowing how to mend it. Now, it lay dormant on aging paper, waiting. She closed her eyes, recalling the last time she touched the notebook, sitting beside her mother in a hospital, the heart monitor's beeps piercing the air as her mother, ravaged by rapid Alzheimer's, slept in a wheelchair. Helen had tried solving equations to drown out the sound. She never completed her PhD, never returned to MIT. She moved to Portland to care for her mother, taking any job, first at a corner store, then a local school, and eventually the university kitchen. The line, "You work in the kitchen, stay there," echoed in her mind. But this time, Helen didn't weep. She turned to the notebook's final page and began writing, not with anger or desperation, but with clarity, with love, with the brilliance that once earned her standing ovations in crowded lecture halls. She recalled the equation, not perfectly, but close enough. One line, then another. Her hand steadied, her heart focused, and in that quiet apartment kitchen, she smiled softly and whispered, "There it is." It was always there. The campus was still asleep when Helen stepped outside on May 4, 2024, the sky a deep indigo, the first light grazing the treetops. She crossed the empty quad slowly, carrying only her notebook, not cleaning supplies. She entered the math building through a side door, the hall cloaked in a sacred silence. In room 2B, empty as expected, a pristine whiteboard stood at the front, markers on the ledge. She opened her notebook, picked up a blue marker, and stared at the board before lifting her hand. No hesitation. Line 1, framework. Line 2, variable shift. Line 3, vector inversion. Line 4, entropy correction. Line 5, solution. 5 lines, no fluff, no ego, just elegance. When she finished, Helen gazed at the board with peace, not pride. There was nothing more to say. She capped the marker, tucked the notebook under her arm, and left the room. Outside, the sun was just rising over the campus clock tower, and no one knew a woman they never noticed had solved what the brightest minds couldn't. Professor Henry Ben's footsteps echoed as he opened the door to room 2B, coffee in hand, expecting another fruitless morning. But he froze. There, on the board, were 5 lines of math, elegant, precise, astonishing. He blinked, stepped closer, his coffee cup tilting as he whispered, "Impossible." Within minutes, he was on the phone. Dr. Leo arrived, then Dr. James, then 2 teaching assistants. 6 people stood shoulder to shoulder, staring at the board, murmuring and debating. "This isn't a fluke. It's brilliant, but none of us wrote this. Who did this? This could be groundbreaking." Someone snapped a photo and posted it online. The Newton-Hayes equation solved, and nobody knows by who. The post went viral in minutes. Speculation swirled. Was it a visiting scholar, an AI, a hoax? On campus, the pressure grew. Who had been in room 2B that morning? They checked the hallway security footage, fast-forwarding to early dawn. There, walking calmly into the building, was a small woman in a white uniform, a hairnet, and a notebook in her arms. "Miss Helen." Silence gripped the department office. "No way," said Ben. "That's the cafeteria worker," whispered James. "This can't be right." But the footage was undeniable. The woman they passed daily, who poured their coffee and cleaned their tables, had outsmarted them all to be why the next morning, May 5, 2024, her name wasn't just a whisper. It hummed through every hallway, chat group, and email thread. Who is Miss Helen? Students slipped notes onto the cafeteria counter. Did you solve it? Teach us. Is it true? She kept her head down, doing her job, but now the stares followed, respectful, curious, tinged with guilt. Professor Ben scoured old academic archives and found Helen Ruth Parker, MIT class of 1983, graduated with highest honors, a young math prodigy featured in journals and invited to global conferences. Then, after 1986, nothing. She vanished from academia like a ghost. In the cafeteria, a group of black students huddled around a phone, one pointing to a decades-old magazine cover. That's her. She was a genius, and they erased her. Or maybe she erased herself. The university needed answers. Dr. James requested a private meeting. Helen declined twice but agreed on the 3rd try, with one condition: no cameras, no press, no questions about the equation, just listen. On May 6, 2024, in a small, quiet office smelling faintly of stale coffee and fresh paint, Helen sat across from Professors Ben, James, and Leo, her spiral notebook on the table like a sealed memory. She didn't flinch or fidget, just looked at them calmly. "You want to know who I am," she said evenly. "So I'll tell you. But don't expect a grand tragedy. Sometimes pain doesn't shout, it waits." The room stayed silent. "My name is Helen Ruth Parker. I graduated from MIT in 1983, top of my class. I was published by 20, invited to conferences called The Future of Mathematical Theory." She paused. "That same year, my mother was diagnosed with advanced Alzheimer's. The air shifted. My father was gone. I was all she had. I had to choose, equations or family. In my world, family wins." Dr. James looked down, her lips tight. The university offered grants, support. But Alzheimer's doesn't wait. It devours time. It erases everything. Her voice wavered slightly. "I cared for her for 6 years, watched her forget my name, my face, how to speak. I stayed." Silence. "When she passed, I didn't go back. Academia had moved on. My place was gone. My name erased." She looked at them directly, strong and clear. I didn't abandon math. Math never abandoned me. I walked away for love. Dr. Leo swallowed hard, Dr. James was shaken, and even Ben was speechless. In that quiet office, the academic elite saw Helen, not as a worker or a mystery, but as a woman who sacrificed everything for something greater than acclaim. The next morning, May 7, 2024, Helen stepped into the cafeteria at 7:05 a.m. as always, but something had changed. The room was silent. Students, staff, and professors stood, and then applause began. Slow, then powerful, not polite or forced, but genuine. Helen stopped in her tracks. All those eyes, once indifferent, now held awe, regret, and gratitude. A young black lady with short braids approached and said softly, "Miss Helen, you don't have to serve anyone today. We're here to serve you. Thank you." Helen gave a small, tearful smile. Later that afternoon, the university president announced a new scholarship in her honor, the Helen Parker Fellowship for Hidden Excellence. Even more surprising, Helen was invited to give a guest lecture. She declined twice but agreed on the third request, with one condition: I won't talk about formulas. You have enough people for that. I'll talk about what's not taught, listening to those you've overlooked. On May 8, 2024, the university's main auditorium was packed. Students filled the seats, faculty lined the walls, and even janitors and cafeteria workers sat in the plush chairs for the first time. The lights dimmed, and Helen walked onto the stage slowly, gracefully, in a dark blue dress, clutching her old spiral notebook to her chest. No spotlight, no music, just a woman and her truth. She stepped to the podium, looked at the crowd, and began, "Good afternoon. My name is Helen Ruth Parker. I've poured coffee for many of you, cleaned your tables, watched you laugh and ignore me." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but her tone wasn't bitter. It was honest, calm, focused. "For years, I thought my story was done, that math was something I left behind. But it never left me. It lives right here." She placed her hand over her heart. "When you laughed at me, told me to stay in the kitchen, it wasn't the first time. And it won't be the last time someone underestimates a black woman." That line hit like a thunderbolt, but she spoke with clarity, not anger. What you don't grasp is that brilliance doesn't wear a uniform or come with a title. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's the one person you never thought to ask. She opened her notebook to the last page. "These 5 lines you saw aren't about numbers. They're about respect. They're what happens when someone ignored finally speaks." She closed the notebook gently. "I'm not here to be a symbol or a token. I'm here to remind you that knowledge without humility is just ego." After a long pause, her final words, "You see me now, but how many Helens do you still pass by every day?" The entire room stood, no one needing prompting. Thunderous applause followed. Some cried, others bowed their heads. In that moment, the university didn't just hear her, they felt her. The next morning, May 9, 2024, the cafeteria looked transformed. The walls were freshly painted, new plants stood in the corners, and framed photos of staff and students hung beside academic awards. In the center was a portrait of a young Helen holding her MIT medal, with gold lettering below. "Knowledge is knowing. Wisdom is listening. Helen R. Parker." She moved through the space with quiet dignity, not rushing, not fading into the background. Her name tag now read Visiting Professor, Advanced Mathematics, but she still wore the white kitchen shirt by choice. "It's comfortable," she told people, "and it reminds me where I come from." At the coffee station, an anxious freshman, a young black woman with glasses and tight curls, approached, clutching a notebook. "Miss Helen," she said, voice trembling, "I saw your speech. I wrote a theory, but I'm not sure it makes sense." Helen smiled, opened the notebook slowly, and studied the equations, scribbles, and ideas in progress. She nodded, tapped the top of the page where it said Page 1, and said, "You see this right here? This is the most important number. The first step. The first time you dared to write. The rest comes later." The girl exhaled, relieved. Helen closed the notebook gently and said, "Sometimes you just have to wipe the table clean to see the problem from a new angle." They both smiled, and life quietly, beautifully moved forward.